So, good afternoon. Uh, I assume that you already have the managerial economics class, and in managerial economics, you may have read about the functioning of economic system, where the focus of attention was only on the individual unit of an economic system. That means, see, economy faces different problem. Managing a company is different from managing a country, right? Suppose you are a CEO of a 16 trillion or $5 trillion company, and you are managing that successfully, generating large amount of revenue for your shareholders. That may not be the same thing if you are being asked to run or manage a economy or manage a country of the same value, maybe the 5 trillion GDP. So, there is a huge differences, because there is a difference the way we analyze and we respond to the problem faced by a company, and there is a way we understand, analyze and respond to the problem faced by a country. Therefore, you as a manager must have a clear understanding of how a country or how an economy functions. And when you understand how an economy functions, it will help you to manage your company, because even though you can control everything in your company is subject to the fever and subject to the happiness which the economy gives you. If the economy is suffering from fever, the company will also suffer from fever. So, therefore, there is a huge connect between what kind of economic circumstances or business environment the economy is giving you to run or manage your company. Now, having said that, now suppose if the time tends to infinity means as we increase in the years, for example, year 2010, then 2030 and then 2080, as the t tends to infinity, and there is everything fine with any economy. There is neither a negative shock or neither a positive shock, there is no COVID like shock, the government is not imposing any kind of lockdown, then your GDP will grow like this, or the economy, the amount of output the country is producing will grow like a trend line. But in reality what happens, the economy never grows with a trend line, it hardly grows with a trend line. Reason is, economy is subject to different types of shock, leading to large ups and down fluctuation in economic activities, broadly called the business cycle. So, higher level of economic activity generating higher level of output or GDP, then you reach the peak, and from the peak something wrong happens, maybe because the investors were taking excessive risk or the companies were making very optimistic and they were making some risky investment, those investment turned bad, leading to some decline in economic activity or causing a slowdown in economic activity. Or just suppose economy is here and then the COVID-19 shock came, government imposed lockdown, leading to decline in economic activity. This is we called recession. And recession, if dives further or economic activity declines further, we call it a depression. The bottom part of depression or bottom part of economic activity is called trough. So, the peak is the maximum level of economic activity, trough is the lowest point of economic activity. After that something good happens, maybe the government responds by a monetary policy or a good fiscal policy, leading to revival of economic activity. Now, this time gap between one peak to another peak is known as business cycle, right. So, you have the good economic activity, you reach the boom or prosperity, then you decline, you slow down, then you go below the trend line, then you reach the minimum point and then you recover. Now, we know that this kind of business cycle do come in every economic system, but we don't know the precise timing. Nobody knows when a particular economy will be subject to a business cycle, but everybody knows that this kind of business cycle, ups and down or the swings in the aggregate output will come, but we don't know the time. Now, one role of the policy makers or macroeconomists is to minimize this positive movement and this negative movement, and the positive movement, because this excessive movement beyond the trend line has its own consequences on economic activity. Here the people lose a large amount of job, they become unemployed, and here they take excessive risk for making fresh investments. Any deviation or any frequent fluctuation in economic activity leads to higher level of cost to the economy in terms of slowdown, declining economic activity, then you have the higher level of inflation, etc., etc. So, objective is to keep the fluctuation as minimum as possible. If you can keep the fluctuation as minimum as possible, the time and duration of unemployment will be less, time and duration of recession will be less, and there will be very less periods of painful adjustment in the economies. The economy will only sacrifice a little amount of output and it will deliver higher standard of living continuously for a large amount of people. So, therefore, this is the role of macroeconomists, and in this paper we are going to see some of the main issues that concerns different economies and how to respond to those problems. Now, one of the, just we say that if you are driving a car, just like if you see the balance sheet of a company, in accounting paper you may have seen, if you see the balance sheet of a company, by analyzing the balance sheet you will be able to tell whether the company is doing good or bad, whether the company is reporting profit or it is reporting loss, whether the company is really generating large amount of revenue or the company is a financially distressed company. Similarly, every country also gives some indicator, economists calculate or create an indicator. By seeing those indicator and barometer you will be able to tell whether the country is doing good, economy is doing good or bad. One such very important indicator is the measure of gross domestic output or measure of total output produced by the economy. So, there are millions of people, large amount of company producing large amount of goods, and if you sum them together that becomes your aggregate output or the total output. Now, one of the major problem is how to calculate and how do we measure that how many units of goods and services the country or the economy is producing. Now, one such indicator and the measure is the measure of national income or gross output or national output. So, we say that the GDP of a country is the monetary value of all final goods produced in the country in a accounting year. Okay? Now, simply speaking, the GDP is the monetary value of all goods and services. Mind it, we are also calculating the services. For example, the service of a doctor, service of a teacher, service of a domestic help, service of a lawyer. So, the monetary value of all goods and services that is produced by the economy in an accounting year. So, point to keep in mind is we are taking monetary value, we are taking final goods, we are taking consideration of a accounting year within a particular year, right. Now, suppose we want to measure the GDP of India, and India produces only two goods, the one is apple and pen. We know that India produces a large amount of goods, any country produces large amount of goods. Just assume, just to understand abstract, assume that India produces only two goods, the one is the apple and pen. Now, to calculate the GDP or the gross domestic product or the total output of this country, we need one more information. That information is what is the amount of apple the country has produced in this accounting year. For example, suppose we want to calculate the GDP in the year 2023. So, GDP of India in the year 2023, amount of apple produced plus the quantity of pens produced. Then we say the monetary value of all goods and services. That means the price of apple multiplied by the quantity of price of pens. So, if you multiply the price of apple with the quantity of apple, that is your monetary value of apples produced, and this is the monetary value of pens produced, and that will give you the GDP of country which is only producing two goods hypothetically. That will give you the total gross domestic product of this GDP country. Now, what is this domestic? Domestic is we are only considering the political and economic boundary of a country. We are assuming that the country is neither exporting nor importing. We are also assuming that nobody from India goes to US, Europe or UAE to work, and nobody from US, Europe and UAE come to India to work, right. This is what we have assumed so far. Now, slightly modifying this relationship, you can say that the GDP of a country in the year 2023, which produces n numbers of goods, it means price of n amount of goods and services and the quantity of n amount of goods and services. So, India produces needle, it produces cross, it produces medicine, it produces housing, it produces shoe, it produces books, it produces rocket, it produces helicopter, then electrical item, mobile items, large amount of goods produces. So, those goods and services up to n amount of goods and services, if I use summation, I can simply write summation I is equal 1 to n, then Pi and the Qi. That means large amount of goods and services the country produces. How many units of those goods you have produced multiplied by at what price those goods have been sold, that will give you the GDP of this hypothetical economy. And this is the process broadly followed by different countries to calculate the gross domestic product of the economy, right. This is the formula, the way of understanding. Actually, this is not the correct formula, but this is the way of understanding that what actually you will do. If suppose there are 50 items the country is producing, 50 items, so you are taking those 50 items, how many units you have produced and at what price those products have been sold in the market for consumption. Then if you multiply, collect data on that, and when you multiply, you will get the monetary value of goods and services. So, you will get 1 billion, 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, that is the figure that is reported in newspaper as a gross domestic product, right. Now, once you have this figure, one of the major problem with this way of measuring GDP is we frequently link GDP with the growth or the economic growth. For example, if I say the GDP in the year 2013 is equal to price of apple in the year 2023, then the quantity of apple in the year 2003 plus the price of pen in the year 2023 into the quantity of pens in the year 2023, right. Now, you also write this GDP is equal to summation I is equal 1 to n Pi and Qi. Now, we are again continuing with the example of a 2 goods. So, this economy produces only 2 goods, right. Now, one of the major problem with GDP as a measure of economic growth, because frequently it becomes a political debate, it becomes a debate within the political class and the economic class, that they say that when the GDP goes up, the economy is doing good. When the GDP goes down, the economy is not doing good, it becomes a big issue. Now, can we take GDP as a measuring rod of economic growth? Now, one way of defining economic growth, there are different definitions of economic growth. One way of defining economic growth is there is a continuous improvement or there is some improvement in the standard of living of people, right. For example, there is a large amount of hospital open, good roads, good medical facility, good schooling system, good roadways, highways, sport, etc. Increasing per capita income also. So, your GDP goes up divided by the population, your per capita income. If the GDP growth is more than the growth of population, your per capita income is also growing. So, it means people have more money to consume and therefore, they can afford a better life. In other words, standard of living improves. Now, if that is the case, then there is a problem with the way we use GDP to measure economic growth. The one problem is look at this. Suppose the economy is not producing more apple, economy is not producing more pens. Only the price of pen goes up and the price of apple goes up. Suppose there is a bad weather in Himachal and Kashmir. As a result, there is a fewer amount of output available, or suppose the output remains same, but the government has given dearness allowance, people have more money to spend, they want to consume more apple, but the weather was not good. As a result, the output production did not increase, but the price went up. So, when the price went up, price of this goes up, this remaining the constant, price of pens goes up and this remaining the constant, your entire GDP will go up. Whereas, there is no significant change in the standard of living of people. The reason is the amount of goods available to consume hasn't increased. And if there is a no increase in that, we can't say that the economic growth is taking place. So, therefore, GDP measured in this way has a demerit that you can't use GDP as a measuring rod to measure economic growth. You can't use GDP as a measuring rod to measure whether there is improvement or decline in the standard of living of people. Now, what we can do? Economists has designed a different way of measuring GDP. Now, this way of measuring GDP is known as NGDP or nominal GDP. This is called NGDP or nominal GDP. Nominal gross domestic product. Why nominal? Because you are using current GDP, current prices. So, you are multiplying the current prices with the current amount of output. We are calculating GDP for the year 2023 by using prices which are prevailing today to multiply with the amount of apple the Indian economy has produced today. In that case, there is a fair chance that within one accounting year, the prices may go up. And as a result, even if output is not going up, your GDP is going up. So, to rule out this possibility that your output increases, then only your GDP goes up, economists use real GDP or RGDP. Right? This real GDP is used using a base year price. What is a base year price? A base year price is a price which has already passed, right? So, it means there is no chance that the price is going to change. So, suppose if I say the price of apple in the year 2011-12 and the quantity of apple in the year 2023 plus the price of pen in the year 2011-12 and the quantity of pen in the year 2023. So, I am using the base year price with the current output, right. So, the base year price multiplied by current output. In this case, the price will never change because it is a old price, the year has already passed, right. So, in this case GDP will go, real GDP will go up only when the output of pens and apples increases, a real GDP will decline only when the output of pens and apples declines. And then you will be able to say comparatively compared to 2011-12 whether we have progressed or we have not progressed, whether the economy has experienced growth or not experienced growth, right. Now, this real GDP and nominal GDP can be used to calculate one more statistic, that is called your GDP deflator. GDP deflator is nominal GDP divided by real GDP, correct. In another words, you can say that this is simply price time amount of output produced divided by amount of output produced. Y is equal to amount of output produced. So, this is nominal because you are using current year prices, and this is real because you are using a constant prices. Prices are not changing. So, it does not make any sense to look toward the prices because prices are constant. Since beginning 2011-12 the price has not changed here. So, if you cross this, what is left is the price. GDP deflator is just the price. So, GDP deflator can be used to measure what is happening to the prices. If you calculate the growth rate of GDP deflator, that will give you inflation rate based on GDP deflator, and based on those inflation rate you will be able to say whether the country is facing inflation or deflation, right. Is that clear? Now, there are different way of measuring GDP. This was the one broad umbrella formula, that this is what we do while measuring the GDP. Now there are different methods of measuring GDP. One method is so we measure GDP using production method, expenditure method and income method. Income method. So we measure GDP using production method, expenditure method and income method, and by logic the output or the GDP calculated using production method must be equal to GDP calculated using expenditure method, and that must be equal to GDP calculated using income method. Why? All must be equal because you are measuring the same thing, but you are using three different methods, right? Now there will be slight differences. That may be because we have a different way of collecting data, we have a different way of processing data, we have different sample size. So if you account for those statistical differences, then approximately the GDP calculated using three different methods must be equal. Now what is the reason? You take perfect. सही कह रहे हो. So what we will do, we will gradually relax one after one these assumptions. So we are going step by step, gradually we will relax these assumptions, okay. Now suppose there are four factors of production. So we call factors of production. So there is a land, बिल्कुल, labor, capital and entrepreneur, right? Suppose India has only one company. That is Maruti. This is hypothetically. We know that there is a large amount of company. Hypothetically there is only one company, and that one company produces only one Wagoner. So your Y is equal to one Wagoner, and if that Wagoner sells for 5 lakh, so your P is equal to 5 lakh. So the total amount of GDP is simply P times Y is equal to 5 lakh. Now this 5 lakh will be distributed to entrepreneur as a profit, capital as a interest, land as a rent and labor as a wage, correct? And collectively suppose that there are these 5 individual or these 4 individual are going to consume only one product. Suppose they consume only one product. Where will they spend or what will they consume? They consume only this Wagoner. So collectively they will buy Wagoner for how much? 5 lakh rupees. So it means the income of company Maruti is just the expenditure made by the employees, and income of the employees are simply the expenditure made by Maruti in the form of salaries. So in either way, if you approach the system, you will find that my income is your expenditure is my income. So as a result, technically speaking, if we assume some irregularity of statistical method the way we are calculating, the GDP figure must be more or less same. So there is some changes, deviation, that is because of statistical discrepancy. Now we will see one after one how the GDP is calculated for this simple economy using the production method, expenditure method and income method. Now first we go to the production method. So, the PPT is not working, so I have to create the hypothetical example. Okay. Take a simple example. Under the production method, we measure the output produced by different sectors of the economy, and we sum them together to get the GDP of a country, right. That means how many the economy can be divided in three sectors. For example, so you have the primary sector, that is agriculture and allied activities, then secondary sector, that is your manufacturing, and the tertiary sector, that is your services, right. So, what is the total amount of output produced by the primary sector multiplied by the price? What is the total amount of output produced by manufacturing multiplied by price? And what is the total amount of output produced by the service sector multiplied by price, right. So, you get the GDP using the production method. But one of the problem is there is a chance of double counting. What appears to be a final product may not be final product. It may be intermediate product. So, the product are so two types, the one is the final product and the other is the intermediate product, right. Now, if you go with the value added method or you focus on the value added, then you will be able to avoid this problem of double counting. So, for example, suppose how do you define the value added? Value added is the improvement in the or increase in the value of a product during different stages of production. As the stage of production progresses or as the production progresses, small value additions are made on the product. So, for example, the farmer produces step 1, the farmer produces wheat and he sells the wheat in 100 rupees to a bakery, right. So, what is the value added by the farmer? First man, he has produced the maximum value, he has generated wheat worth rupees 100. Now, the baker used the wheat and transformed them into bread and then he sold the bread in 120 rupees. So, actually out of 120 rupees, 100 rupees is the value added by the farmer, 20 rupees is the extra value that the baker has added. So, the value added by the baker is not 120, it is only 20. Now, third, the bread is being used by the Domino's Pizza to produce pizza and then the company sold the bread at 140. So, actually the company modified the bread, added the value worth rupees 20 so that it is able to sell the product at 140. So, the extra value added by the Domino is 20 rupees. Now, if you add this, actually you are over calculating your GDP. So, either you use the summation of this value added, that is sum to 140 rupees, or you use the price of the final product. You have to ignore this one. If you ignore this one, then only you will be able to get the exact data, because the 140 rupees includes the prices of baked bread and wheat. So, by using the value added, either you include this one or this one, you will be able to avoid the problem of double counting, and this way you will be able to calculate the GDP using the production method. I do not have the slide working, otherwise I would have shown. If you go to RBI's website and then you go to the handbook of statistics on Indian economy, you will be able to see the GDP calculated using production method. or the value added method. There you will find the gross value added, GVA, the gross value added. That is calculated for primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector. Sum them together, you will be able to get the gross value added by entire economy. Is that clear? Now the second is the expenditure method. Under the expenditure method, we target on the what is the total amount of expenditure generated in the economy. If you can monitor, if you can calculate or sum the total expenditure made by individuals, then you will be able to calculate the GDP using expenditure method. That is C plus I plus G plus NX. That is your consumption, investment, government expenditure and net export. Net export, right? Now what is net export? Net export is export minus import, right? Now if the country produces Y amount of goods and services, why I am using the word Y? Because in economics we use Y to denote output, income and production. See, all three are same. So therefore we use Y to indicate output, income and production. So don't get confused, Y indicates only output and the income and the production, right? Now if the Y amount of output is produced, that output is either consumed or invested by the private sector in suppose residential and official and non-residential, like the builders and the other companies are building offices and the factories, or the output will be used by the government for consumption and investment, because government also consumes the revenue expenditure. Government has to run the government machinery, pay the salary and other things, manage the defense, then government has to build the road, port and highways. So the government makes consumption expenditure and investment expenditure. Then certain amounts of goods and services which are produced in India but not consumed in India, because we export those goods and services. There are certain amount of goods and services which are not produced in India but they are consumed in India. We import those goods and services. The net effect is taken here. So if your exports are lesser and imports are more, this will be a negative and your GDP will be slightly lower, right? Now if we sum this together, we will be able to get the GDP of country by using the expenditure method, because you have the consumption expenditure, investment expenditure, government expenditure and the expenditure on export and imports, right? The third method is to calculate the GDP by using the income method. Now under the income method, now remember, the Y amount of output is produced by some actors. Those actors are land, labor, capital and the industrialist or entrepreneur, right? And collectively they produce the Y amount of output. Entrepreneur combines, you can put the raw material also. I have excluded the raw material. So land, labor, capital, entrepreneur and raw material I have excluded. These are the factor inputs, combined together they produce goods and services, right? Now for their participation in the production process, once the output is produced, the land gets rent, the labor gets wage, the capital get interest and the entrepreneur gets profit. Now if you sum this all 4 units across the Indian economy, you will be able to calculate the GDP of country by using income method. Now you can see the cycle. Income generated is equal to expenditure created, that is equal to the amount of output produced, assuming that saving and investments are 0. Many a time our expenditure can be more than our income, reason being there are FIIs and FDIs. So if you require more funds, the funds come. That we are going to relax those assumptions later, but for the time being, just assume that this is one of the way. If you are able to have access to the information on the income received by different agents in the economy, and if you sum them together, you will be able to calculate the GDP, and this will be the GDP of country using the income approach, right? Now you can use we use GDP as a measuring rod to measure whether the economic growth is taking place or not, or whether the standard of living of individuals are increasing or not. But this measuring rod has certain demerits. It is subject to certain shortcomings. Those shortcomings are, the one is it does not account for the environmental issue. Environmental issue means to produce Y amount of goods and services. Company, domestic. Demerits of GDP. Demerits of GDP. Demerits of GDP of what? Demerits of GDP as a measuring rod for economic growth. For economic growth. Okay. The one thing is, if the company produces Y amount of output, it utilizes a large amount of natural resources. It emits certain amount of pollutant in the environment. So the air gets polluted. Excessive utilization of natural resources leads to depletion of very precious natural resources. Then you get polluted water. All those costs are not reflected in GDP. Even though your GDP is going up, a large amount of pollution is occurring in the economy, and as a result, that is not accounted. So you say the GDP is going up, economic growth is taking place, but the people are breathing polluted air, they are drinking polluted water, it has serious consequences for their health. So that is not accounted in the GDP figure. So that is one disadvantage. So if you look at the industrial revolution that has happened in China and that we are experiencing now, air is polluted in Delhi and then the water is polluted. So once upon a time when the China was spearheading the growth, more than 10% of growth, majority of the big rivers in Chinese economy were polluted. Air was polluted, completely polluted in Beijing. So those numbers are actually not reflected in GDP figure. So even though GDP is going up, standard of living is not improving because you are actually having different types of ill impact of a growing GDP. Number two, it is also possible, see, economies have designed green GDP. They have designed green GDP to account for the environmental damage we are causing to environment while producing goods and services. But there are problems with the green GDP, that's for it has not become very popular. The problem is you need some proxy, because if the air is polluted, you need some proxy to say that this is the actual cost of pollution. If the water is polluted, you need some monetary proxy. Unless you have a monetary proxy, you won't be able to penalize your GDP. That amount you need to reduce. So unless you have a very good proxy, and finding a good proxy for environmental issues is a very difficult task. Therefore, it has become very difficult to popularize the green GDP. So what we have is, we have the gross domestic product or the normal GDP, NGDP or RGDP, rather than we use the green GDP, right? The second issue is, the second change is the GDP figure are unable to account for any changes in the societal status of the economy. That means, suppose if the GDP is going up, that does not mean that standard of living is improving if the crime rate is simultaneously also going up. If the crime rate is going up and majority of increase in your income that you have to spend on your protection, In that case, it will be difficult to say that the economic growth is taking place because the people are not better off. Because of a higher level of crime, they are unable to consume the large amount of product that they can afford to buy, because there is a large amount of theft and robbery, there is a large amount of antisocial activity going on. The same is not reflected in GDP figure. GDP will only tell you GDP is going up, and we will end up saying that economic growth is taking place, whereas it is not taking place. The third one is the size of black economy. Size of black economy means, if the size of black economy or underground economy is large, you will be able to estimate only a underreported GDP figure. Underreported GDP figure means, for example, suppose there are two countries. One country, most of the things are illegal, and other country only a small amount of things are illegal. In this country, since the size of the underground economy or black market economy is small, the GDP figure will be more accurate. But here you will say that the GDP of this country is very less. Why? Majority of activities are not reported. So people are employed in illegal activities, but the government data will say that they are unemployed. People are earning handsome money in illegal activities, but the government data will say that since they are unemployed, they are poor. So you will end up estimating a very underreported value of GDP if the size of the black market economy is very large. And in that case, we won't be able to use GDP as a measure of economic growth and development, right? So GDP can be used when the size of the underground economy is relatively small. Now, despite there are many demerits, despite there are many criticisms of GDP figure, but we don't have anything better than this. There are different index economies of design to capture different aspect, because with one aspect you can focus, with one index you will be able to focus on only one aspect of the economy. So you have the human happiness index, you have the corruption index. So different levels, different problems, these different issues are captured by different concepts. So it is not accommodated here, but it can be accommodated in different indexes, right? But yes, even though there are criticism of GDP, we don't have any better alternatives, and it is always good to have something than nothing, right? So rather than criticizing GDP, it is better to use it, right? जैसे कि for example, you see the pilot को उसके cockpit में उसका जो है equipment होता है that tells the speed of the flight. Now suppose if there are no such technological advancement that can tell the pilot what is the speed of the plane, and उसमें कुछ breakdown हो जाता है, then the pilot is able to calculate the speed by seeing the horizon. तो वो एक रफ अंदाजा उसको आ जाता है. So even though we say that the GDP is not a good measure or perfect measure of economic growth and development, it is a fairly good measure of economic growth and development, right? Though criticism, but it's a fairly good. The second topic is unemployment or the labor market. Okay. Like we have market for different products. In the labor market, the skill and services of labor workers are sold as a product. So when you graduate from a course and you seek job opportunities, you are actually essentially trying to sell your labor, and the company, those who require your labor, they make demand for it, right. Now the demand for goods and services is called a direct demand, whereas the demand for labor or demand for worker is called derived demand or indirect demand. Derived demand in the sense that now you have two diagrams here. The first diagram, now from your managerial economics you know that the quantity demanded of apple can be presented by the downward sloping demand curve, which indicates a inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, and the quantity supplied of apple can be used by a supply curve. Following the law of supply, it is a positively sloped line. Higher the price, the apple supplier will supply more apple, but higher the price, low amount of apple will be demanded. Equilibrium price will be determined the point at which both curve intersect, giving us Q star and P star, right. This is called the direct demand for apple, because you are not demanding anything, you are directly demanding apple, demand for final product that you can consume. Now when there is a higher demand for apple, the company will demand large amount of apple pickers, because company needs some amount of worker, so that there will be demand for apple pickers or the workers. So you say this is the demand for labor. Demand for labor curve is a negatively sloped curve. From your managerial economics or microeconomics you can recollect that when the wage is high, only a small amount of workers are demanded, and when the wage is less, a large amount of workers are demanded, right. Large amount of workers are demanded, correct. Therefore you have a negatively sloped curve, that is called demand curve for labor, and the supply curve of labor is a positively sloped curve. It means higher the wage, a large amount of people are willing to work. If you increase the wage, large amount of people are willing to work, and therefore there will be more supply of worker. If you reduce the wage, only a lesser amount of people will be willing to work, correct. So there is a positive relationship. Now remember, there is no reason that why the labor supply curve is always positively sloped. Labor supply curve can be negatively sloped also. We can draw the labor supply curve in this way also. So it has a negatively sloped part and it has a positively sloped part, and that negatively positively sloped comes at wage W star. Now what is this W star? Where the supply curve has changed. As the salary increases, gradually the workers are able to meet most of their demand, and they accumulate sufficient amount of wealth. If that happens, what will happen? Initially, as the wage increases, larger and larger amount of people are willing to work. But once you reach W star, and beyond that if you increase the amount of wage, only a lesser amount of workers are willing to work. Now they, rather than working, they prefer to go on vacation, right. They are no more willing to work because they have enough salary. So as a result, the labor supply curve is a backward bending curve or inverted U-shape curve, we call it a inverted U-shape. But for the time being, we ignore this possibility and we draw the labor supply curve as a positively sloped line, correct. Now in this market, the equilibrium can be achieved to supply Q star of apple, OL star amount of workers are required, and the company will pay W star wages, right. Now if something goes wrong with the apple, suppose the demand for apple reduces, the demand for apple picker will also reduce. If the demand for apple increases, your curve will shift forward, demand for apple pickers will also shift forward. So it means how many units of apple pickers will be demanded by companies in the market largely depends upon how many units of apple are demanded in market. So therefore we say the demand for labor is a derived demand or indirect demand. It is a derived demand, right. Now if you allow wages to be flexible, wages to adjust upward and downward, then the market will always clear. It means there will be neither excess supply of worker nor there will be excess demand for workers. But if you do not allow wages to adjust by any regulation, by fixation of any kind of interference by the government. If the wages are sticky, certain amount of unemployment will prevail in the economy. Reason? Now look at this diagram. So every country has a labor force. What is a labor force? Labor force is equal to the amount of unemployed people by an employed people. So those who are over and above the 18 years of age and before the retirement age 60, 65, in our case 65 or majority of the cases 60 years, they are part of the labor force. Either you are unemployed or you are employed. Now unemployment rate or the unemployment rate is simply unemployed divided by the labor force. So if the unemployment rate is 4.5%, so it means for every 100 people 4.5% are unable to find a good job, right? They are willing and able to work, but they are unable to find job. So when unemployment rate goes up, it is a major cause of concern for any economy and any government, right? Now this labor force is a fixed amount. At any point of time today, the labor force of India is a fixed amount. क्योंकि 18 साल से लेके 60 साल के बीच में जितने लोग हैं वो एक फिक्स अमाउंट होगा, एक फाइनाइट अमाउंट होगा, राइट? सो इट मीन्स द लेबर फोर्स इज ए finite amount, although it continuously increases because new peoples are joining, they are crossing the 18 years of age and they are joining the labor force, but any point of time your labor force is actually dictated by a vertical line, right? And if everything is fine, this many people are able to find a job when the wage rate is W star. That means out of the labor force, this many people are remaining unemployed. They are remaining unemployed. They are unable to find job at this ongoing wage rate. Now, if you want to accommodate these individuals or want to pull them in employment, the wages must adjust. Wages must adjust means the wage must be this. The wage must be W1, which is lower than W star. If you can fix the wage W1, then the company will be able to hire this extra amount of worker and unemployment will be completely zero. Now, we can't have zero unemployment. There are consequences for it that we will discuss when we are discussing inflation. But just assume that there is a certain amount of unemployment which is prevailing in the economy. So, two major bifurcation of unemployment is, the one is voluntary unemployment and involuntary unemployment. Voluntary unemployment and involuntary unemployment. Right? Voluntary means those who are able to work but they are not willing to work. They have decided not to work for any reason. And the other is those who are able to work and they are willing to work but they are unable to find work or they are unable to find a job. So, as a result, we say that they are involuntarily unemployed and they are the major concern for policy makers, that how to reduce the amount of people which are available in the involuntary unemployed pool, how to reduce the size so that the majority of people are able to work or they are able to find some job, right? Now, with this two bifurcation, we can further bifurcate unemployment. The further bifurcation is, the one is frictional unemployment. Structural unemployment and cyclical unemployment. cyclical unemployment. The frictional unemployment is caused by mismatch between the job search and the availability of job. So, for example, you are employed in a company, you are not happy with the company and you have quit the job and you are unable to find a job for a short period of time. Maybe 2-3 months you are unable to find and join a job. So, for a brief period of time you remain unemployed. That is called frictional unemployment. Now, it is argued that we should actually reduce the frictional unemployment to zero. Sometime there is a school of thought, they say that frictional unemployment zero is a sign of a very hard labor market. क्योंकि अगर frictional unemployment zero है, in that case you won't be able to find a new job if you are not satisfied with the present job. हाँ? नहीं, that is cyclical. हाँ, that is cyclical unemployment. So, cyclical unemployment is basically caused by business cycle. So, when you have the recession, depression and trough, till the time you go to the full recovery, many people lose job either because they are being laid off and there is a firing at will. As a result, unemployment increases for till the time the economy has fully recovered. That is called cyclical unemployment because it is caused by business cycle. If the cyclical unemployment is not responded well, if the policies are not affecting, monetary and fiscal policy are not effective enough to control cyclical unemployment and it gets prolonged for 5 years, 10 years, 11 years, that becomes structural in a word. So, structural unemployment is actually the way economy allocate resources, there is some problem with that. So, the demand and supply is not as per the economy's requirement. So, that is causing certain kind of long term reallocation related disequilibrium in the economy, causing structural unemployment. So, that is the way economy is being functioning, right. Now, there are different reasons. Now, beyond this there are other types of unemployment also. These are three are the main types. The other is, see, sometime you read in the newspaper, the one is seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment, disguised unemployment. So, seasonal unemployment is, suppose there is a farmer and his paddy fields are only suitable to produce sugarcane, and you can grow sugarcane only when there is a sufficient amount of water available, or rice. So, he has a paddy field where the large amount of rain comes. So, it is very difficult to grow wheat because you do not have summer season. So, once you are growing a particular crop, for the rest of the season you will remain unemployment, that is your seasonal unemployment. So, see, once upon a time during summer time only the sale of Coca-Cola goes up, right. When I was around 12 years or 13 years, so at that time during summer time only you will find Pepsi and the Campa Cola in the shops. But thanks to the younger generation, even during winter sale the Pepsi's total amount of orders are not going down, right. Because the taste and preferences have changed. So, sometimes season do play a role in creating level of employment and level of unemployment. Disguised unemployment, as you pointed, is the part, suppose there is a piece of land, small piece of land in which the entire family is involved in producing wheat and they produces 5 tons of wheat. So, 10 family members working together, they produce 5 tons of wheat. If you remove 2 family member, it means with only 8 family member again they are able to produce the same amount of wheat. So, it means the marginal productivity of these 2 workers that you have removed from the production are actually zero. They are not contributing anything, they are just appearing to be involved in the production activity, whereas they are not contributing anything. So, therefore, we call it a disguised unemployment, right. Now, the major cause of concern for the policy makers are how to control the level of unemployment, right. Now, what leads to long term unemployment? Now, in India, during election time unemployment level becomes a very big debate, right. That is a debate. That is a cyclical. COVID is not seasonal, flu you can say, by the time the COVID becomes endemic, like every season you have the COVID attack, so that becomes a part of you are seasonal, but for the timing it is cyclical, because when the COVID-19 came, economy was completely shut down and our economic system completely collapsed. You say that GDP collapsed to -23 in that quarter. So that was a major blow, and as a result many companies, small companies, they completely shut down and unemployment increased. So that was not one time increase that in the next season everybody back to normal. No, many people, they are still unable to find job. As a result, that's a frictional unemployment, no. Structural unemployment, no. In the time it is a cyclical unemployment. Now for some reason, suppose for some reason the workers who migrated from Punjab, Haryana and Delhi and Mumbai to the villages of UP and Bihar and other, and for some reason they are unable to come back to these cities. So there will be large demand for workers in those cities and there will be less supply of worker in those cities. And if that continues for a longer time, if the workers are not coming back to the pre-COVID level, that becomes a structural problem, right? Because the labor market has become such way that is unable to go back to the pre-COVID level. Is that clear? Now, what are the reasons for the long-term unemployment? LTU. Right? Or rather than technology, you take this okay? There are some reasons why different economy face sustained or considerably high level of unemployment for a longer period of time. For example, Europe, France, Germany, Spain, they have a history of facing higher level of unemployment for a longer period of time, maybe more than 10% of unemployment for a longer period of time. Unemployment is not coming back to normal level, right? Now, there are reasons for that. One reason is the fixation of minimum wage. When the government interferes with the functioning of labor market and interferes to fix the minimum wage, we find that there is some amount of unemployment persist in the economy. So for example, you simply draw the diagram. This is the demand of labor, this is the supply of labor, and this is your wage rate, and this is the downward sloping demand and positively sloped supply of labor, and this is everything is fine. The equilibrium wage is W star, and at this wage rate L star people will find job, right? So there is how many units of worker are demanded, they are being supplied, so the market clears, labor market clears. Suppose the government is not happy with this wage rate. The government is not happy with the wage rate. If you remember, before the 7th pay commission, the minimum wage in any office was less than 18,000 rupees. The government fixed it to 18 to 20,000 rupees, right? Suppose the market says that the minimum salary they get to a lower class clerk or anybody is 15,000 rupees. And government is not happy with this. Government decided to fix, the class is live, don't talk in the class. Class is live, don't talk in the class. So 15,000 rupees, if the government is not happy with this 50,000 rupees, suppose government fixes a higher salary. It says that now only 20,000 rupees must be given. That is the minimum salary. The workers might be happy. This is going to be a good policy for the poorer people because the government is giving them a higher wages. But since the wage has increased, at these higher wages, many people want to work. The supply of labor is this, but the companies are willing to hire only a few amount of people. Labor demand is this much. Now, this is the level of unemployment that will prevail in the economy. This is the level of unemployment that will prevail in the economy. So, intention was good, the policy was good, that the government wanted to support the poorer people by increasing their minimum salary, but this good policy has ended up supporting only a fewer amount of people. Earlier, this many people were getting job, only now only this much people will get job, and these people have become unemployed, right. So, sometimes fixation of minimum wage also plays a role in increasing or decreasing the level of unemployment. The second is efficiency wages. Efficiency wages are also one of the reason why many economy experience long term unemployment. Now, what is efficiency wage? Efficiency wage suppose this is your demand for labor and this is your supply of labor and this is your equilibrium wage that will prevail in the market if the labor demand and labor supply is equated by the market forces, right. Suppose this is the demand for computer professional, okay? Demand for computer, if everything is fine, the company will be hiring them at 1.5 lakh, and at that rate OL star amount of worker will be willing to supply their services or to join the job market, right. Now, sometimes the company has a fear, because if there is a frictional unemployment, people are jumping from one company to another company. You are not happy with this company, you will jump to another company after acquiring certain amount of experience here. Now, you can quit the company and the company will be able to hire new workers, but again the company has to invest on the new worker. The company need to give them the training, make them efficient, so that the company is able to get the same previous level of output, because one experienced employee has left. And if that employee is from the top management or involved in a very critical process, maybe a good engineer involved in a very critical process, for example Google, you are involved in designing the Google Chrome search engine, you know the many secrets, how the search engine functions, and you are very critical to the program. In that case, company is not happy to sacrifice you. So, what will the company do? The company will fix a efficiency wage. Efficiency wage means a wage rate which is over and above the market wage rate. It means the company will give you a higher wage, that is your W dash, and this is called efficiency wage. Now, since the company is giving a higher wage, so that the company is able to reduce the turnover ratio. Turnover means many employees quitting the job, so that the employees has a fear. Employee get a fear that if they quit the job, they won't be able to get the same salary in the open market. Now it becomes difficult for the employee to quit the job, because they have got enough incentive. So, that is called efficiency wage. So, in that case, the employee will make every possible effort to become more professional, more sincere, more efficient, because they have a fear of losing the job. So, therefore, by giving a higher salary, the company will be able to enhance the morale, enhance the incentive, enhance the efficiency of the worker, but in that process the company has to spend more, and when the company is spending more, it will be able to hire only less amount of worker, not OL star amount of worker, it will hire only OL amount of worker. So, fixation of efficiency wage has led to generation of unemployment. So, if all companies in the economy are giving efficiency wage, a wage that is over and above the wage which is dictated by the demand and supply condition, the economy is bound to face certain amount of unemployment in the long run. Is that clear? The third problem is the insider-outsider model. Or you can say the labor union, prevalence of labor unions. If the labor union exists, that also leads to certain amount of unemployment in the market. Now, suppose there is only one company in India, Maruti again, okay. So, Maruti has certain amount of people, suppose 5,000 people are working in Maruti. So, total employment here is 5,000. COVID-19 shock came COVID-19 shock came and the company, Maruti ने ऐसा नहीं किया था, but just assume that the company has fired some worker because the sales volume reduced, the company was not willing to continue with them. So just assume that the company fired certain amount of worker. So now the company has only 4,000 worker. ठीक है? Is that clear? Now remove the name Maruti. We just consider XYG company. So XYG company has had 5,000 workers. Now the company has 4,000 workers. Because of some bad economic environment, the company fired some worker. Right? Now suppose this company has a labor union, and this labor union has a utility function, that is protecting the employment of the members and all the fringe benefit. Fringe benefit, suppose alpha. What is the fringe benefit? Maybe the bonus, maybe the office space, maybe the travel allowances, etc., etc. So that labor union, whenever bargains with the company, they will concerned about the employment protection of the members and the fringe benefit, higher salary and wages and the fringe benefit for members only. Correct? Now since the unemployment has increased, why? Because 1,000 people has lost the job. So unless you allow wages to go down, these people won't be able to come back to job. Company will not going to hire. But labor union will try to bargain for these 4,000 people for a higher wages or at least equal wages and a higher or equal level of fringe benefit. So they will not allow wages to go down. If they are not allowing wages to go down, so the new people won't be able to join. So those who have become outsider means those people who have lost job. Insider will not allow them to come inside because they will fight for their wages and they are not concerned about this 1,000 people, those who have lost the job. So the insider will try their best to get the maximum wage possible, maximum fringe benefit possible, maximum employment guarantee possible, without giving any due consideration to their friends who were earlier part of this labor union, but now they are outsider, right? So therefore it is very perplexing situation that those were the part insider, now they have become outsider and the labor union is not concerned about them, therefore the wages will not go down, employment will not go down, and hence gradually they will remain unemployed for a longer period of time. So these are some of the reasons that leads to generation of long term unemployment over time. So suppose there is a XYG company, the company has 5,000 employee and there is a one labor union and the labor union has member, that is 5,000 workers. Whenever there is a, see there are countries where there is a very strong labor unions, for example Germany, there the wage negotiation goes with the labor union. America and India you don't have that kind of, in some companies only there are labor union, otherwise you have the one-to-one wage contract. You join the company, company gives you a contract, in that your terms and conditions are written. But there are countries in which there are very strong labor unions and they collectively bargain the wages. Okay? So suppose there is a labor union and this labor union only works for the members and try to get the maximum possible wage, maximum protection for employment, that the company never fire a worker, and the maximum amount of fringe benefit. Correct? This is what the labor union does, try to get the maximum possible for the employees. So earlier they all are insider, because they all are part of the labor union. Now suppose a bad thing happened in the economy, maybe a recession or very big depression came and some of the people has been fired. Labor union was unable to manage, some of the people have been fired. Now suppose now only 3,000 people are with this and the 2,000 people lost their job. Right? By losing those, they become outsider. And now who are the insider? They are the insider, 3,000. Now whenever there is a wage negotiation, this labor union will bargain for them. They will not pay attention on these 2,000 people, outsiders. Now for outsider to come and join the industry, the wages must decline. because if the wages are not declining, the company won't be able to hire more worker, right? So as a result, the wage decline is necessary if these 2000 people has to join back the job, but this labor union will not allow wages to decline because they will bargain for higher possible wages. They will not allow to do that, and once the company is not able to reduce the wages, the outsider will remain outsider. They will never be able to join back the company. Because in outsider has no role in the wage setting process. क्योंकि एक बार जब आप कंपनी से बाहर निकल गए तो आप वेज नेगोशिएशन का पार्ट नहीं हो. इंडिया में तो और अमेरिका में when you have the individual contract, you can do that because there is no centralized negotiation process. But in a particular company, there is a centralized negotiation process, that your wages, your benefits being negotiated by that labor union, not by you individually. In that case, the labor union will decide what is going to be the wage, what is going to be the level of benefit that you will receive from the company. If that is the case, the labor union will pay attention only on the current member, those who are the insider. It will not pay attention on the other unemployed people or the outsider people. So this is what the outsider insider model tells you, that the presence of labor union creates sometime long term unemployment, right? Now finally, you have the unemployment benefit. Sometimes good economic policy also backfire. So different countries give unemployment benefit to their citizens. For example, you have Canada, you have America, you have Europe, France for example. They give protection or social security benefit once you lose job. So when people lose job, the government support them. In India, you don't have a very good, well-defined social security system. Some of the states, they provide old age pension, etc., etc. But in some of the developed countries, they have a very good social security system. So for example, France, if you are earning 1 lakh rupee and all of a sudden something goes wrong and you lose your job, 60 to 80% your salary will be protected by the government. So you are just compromising 25 to 30% of your salary, right? So that means the citizens are not worried. So 1, 2, 3, 4 years, the government will support you, and in between if you find a good job, then you can join back and you can just leave the social security system. Now if you have this kind of social security system, that is also one of the reasons why the countries find the tendency of unemployment to persist in the long run. So for example, suppose this is your demand for labor and this is the supply of labor, and this is your wage, and this is your simple demand for labor and this is your simple supply of labor, right? Now in this market, suppose earlier L star people were employed at the ongoing wage W star. Okay? Something happened, maybe COVID-19 like shock has happened, or maybe Ukraine-Russia like war has happened. As a result, the oil prices went up. When oil prices went up, the oil prices leading to increase in the cost of production, and the company will supply lesser amount of good. So demand for worker will be reduced, right? When the demand for worker is reduced, so some people will lose their job. So new demand is this is the supply, so this is the new equilibrium, right? At a lower wage one, L1 amount of workers. So this is the level of unemployment that has been created by because of the higher oil prices, or say negative supply shock, anything, negative supply shock, right? Suppose the government has a very good social security system, right? Suppose this wage was 1.5 lakhs per month, or suppose 80,000 rupees per month, and the social security system is 70,000. Okay? Now in this case, the employee has a reason. Those who have lost their job, they have a reason to try for this 80,000 rupees, because this wage is higher than the minimum price or the social security system wage provided by the government. Or suppose ये 40,000 है. So here there is a sufficient gain here. नाउ सपोज कि सोशल सिक्योरिटी सिस्टम ऐसा है कि सोशल सिक्योरिटी सिस्टम समवेयर यहाँ है वो 90,000 रुपीज़ है. सो पीपल हैव ए रीज़न टू रिमेन अनएम्प्लॉयड, क्योंकि काम करके तो ही माइट बी गेटिंग 80,000 रुपीज़. इट इज़ बेटर टू रिमेन अनएम्प्लॉयड बिकॉज विदाउट डूइंग एनीथिंग यू आर गेटिंग 90,000 rupees. So if the social security system is good and in certain cases more than the equilibrium wage, so during the depression or recession equilibrium wage reduces because unemployment increases, equilibrium wage reduces. So in Canada for example 80,000 rupees per month you get. So if you are not getting a job which is giving you 90,000 or 1 lakh rupees, why will you go and join the job? While staying in your house you are getting 80,000 rupees. So sometime fixation of a very handsome attractive minimum social benefit system also causes unemployment. Intention was not to cause unemployment, intention was to support the employees, but it has ultimately produced an undesirable impact in the market that many people, those who are happy with this salary, they are unable to join the job or they are not willing to join the job, right. So these are some of the reasons why unemployment insurance, social security system also creates unemployment. The better example, when you go to home you can read for the France, Germany, Spain. These are some of the country where 60 to 80% of the salaries are protected for the first year and the second year, even up to 4 years around 60% of the salary are protected. So it means that workers are not very afraid of being unemployed. 60 to 70% salary is protected without doing any work, so workers are happy, right. So you have a reason to remain unemployed, you have a reason to get the benefit of social security system, right. So these are some of the reasons which create unemployment. There may be many reasons also, but these are some of the prominent reasons. Okay. Like any other country, India is also facing unemployment level or relatively high level of unemployment, especially after the post-COVID period. The COVID has inflicted a huge pain on the Indian economy, and we are saying 6 to 7% of unemployment rate in the Indian economy at the moment. Now, how to understand the nature or causes of unemployment faced by the Indian economy? The problem faced by Indian economy is slightly different. Now, we can divide the Indian economy in two parts. The one is organized sector of the Indian economy, and the second is the unorganized sector of the Indian economy. Now, in the organized sector, especially you see for example the service sector, all the listed companies registered under the Companies Act, etc., etc. In the organized sector, the workers are working with better technology. They are working with good machine, good computer. As a result, their productivity is relatively high. And when the productivity is high, your salary, wages, remuneration has some proportion to the productivity. Higher the productivity, the worker will get high salary, high wages. So, since they are working with better capital, better machine, better production technique, their productivity is high, they get high wages. And since they get high wages, they are able to maintain a higher standard of living. But the problem with the unorganized sector is they are able to create only a few amount of job. Few amount of job means they are using more amount of technology. So, in the BPO, if you see, one person is working with 3 computers, right. So, more people are working with better technology, less people are working with better technology, leading to higher level of output. So, the job created by the organized sector is relatively less, but the salary and wages is relatively high. In the unorganized sector, those who are unorganized small units, there the productivity of workers are relatively less, because they are not using better machines, they are not using better production technique. As a result, the productivity of workers are relatively less, and when the productivity is less, they get low wages, and when they get low wages, they have a very low standard of living. And the major problem faced by this worker is a large amount of unskilled, semi-skilled workers are crammed together in the unorganized sector. Demand is less, but the supply of worker is more. Many people want to work in the organized sector for high salary, but the companies are creating only a few jobs. So, there is a biasness in the way companies are creating employment in the Indian economy. So, you can say the maldistribution of workers. It means many workers should be employed here, whereas a large amount of workers are employed here, earning low wages and delivering low productivity, right. So, if this is a kind of distribution of worker and that is leading to a higher level of unemployment in the Indian economy. Now, another important point that we can point out is there are reasons. So, if you might have read about the East Asian tiger or the Asian tigers like the Korea, Taiwan and the other companies. So, during 90s, they displayed a remarkable growth, right, and that growth led them generation of a higher level of revenue and higher level of economic growth, correct. They followed the export promotion policy. Now, by being a surplus country, if India is also following export promotion policy, then that may not be suitable for us. Number one, we should be using a large amount of capital labor intensive technique. Labor intensive technique means our production method is such that the more and more amount of workers are used and lesser and lesser amount of capital is used. So, if you are promoting your export, for example, cotton export, Tirupur cotton for example, or now the government is giving big push on the toy industry, because the toy industry is a labor intensive industry. To manufacture toys, okay, mark your attendance, hurry up, mark your attendance and give, ठीक है. So, the critical point is India is a labor surplus country, so we must be following labor intensive technique, and number two, our exports should be oriented to labor intensive exports, right. If we can do that, or if we are using the import substitution policy, like we are, rather than importing from the rest of the world, we are importing or producing the same thing in India. For example, we were importing large amount of iPhone, Now we have the iPhone in manufacturing base opened by the Foxconn in Tamil Nadu, and they are going to open somewhere also. So if you can produce those goods and services in India, a large amount of worker will be accommodated. So for example, semiconductor chips. Semiconductor chip was one of the major reason that we faced the shortage after the COVID crisis. So when the supply chain was completely disrupted, we were running shortage of the semiconductor chips. So as a result, you have the long waiting time for automobiles. If you place a order for Wagoner, you will get long delay because you need around 200 to 300 semiconductors chips to manufacture a automobile. Now many amount of Indian companies are going with the joint venture, so that foreign companies are collaborating and they will produce the same semiconductor in India. We don't have to import those goods and services. Now if we go for import substitution policy, and if at all we have to go for export promotion, we use the labor intensive technique and we focus on those areas where the workers are required in the large amount rather than large amount of capital, then we will be able to deal with your unemployment problem. So we are able to generate more amount of employment, more amount of job by focusing on the labor intensive techniques, right? Now if we can do that, we will be able to deal with the problem. But at the moment, if you see, I don't have the slide today, if you see the level of unemployment which is available at the moment, it is highly skewed between states. Different states are facing different level of unemployment, and the unique feature is many of your exports are using capital intensive technique rather than labor intensive technique. So once upon a time textile was a labor intensive sector, but no more it is a labor intensive sector. A large amount of machines are used. So as a result, even though we are a surplus country, we have a high level of unemployment. And when you say that we have a very young population and we have a demographic dividend, and the high level of unemployment persists in the economy, you won't be able to benefit from the demographic dividend because you are unable to create sufficient jobs for them. So dealing with the unemployment is a very critical element, and that is how to reallocate your production process, where you are gradually shifting towards labor intensive technique by maintaining a higher standard of productivity. Because if you gradually leave toward the labor intensive technique, you are not using machines, your product will become costly, because large scale production is possible, cheap production is possible with the machines. And if your products are not cheap, you won't be able to compete in the international market. So the competing in the international market is a idea that you have to do that, otherwise your export will die down. And if your export is down, your foreign exchange reserve will decline. So you have to pay attention on different problem. At the same time, you have to maintain your competitiveness in the international market, and at the same time you have to generate large amount of jobs by following a labor intensive technique, right? Now with this, we leave the labor market and we gradually move to the third topic of the macroeconomics first unit, that is your inflation. How much time we have? 10 minutes. Huh? ठीक है, mark your attendance. ठीक है, thank you. If you have any question, you can ask. One after one. हाँ. Huh? हाँ. So we have economists and there are studies. They attempt to measure the side of the shadow economy or the black economy. They get some proxy. Okay, they get some proxy, and using the proxy they try to get some understanding of that what is the size of the shadow economy. So that is an indirect calculation, not a direct calculation, because you will never have a direct understanding. That's an indirect calculation. Like for example, see, technology is changing, right? Technology is changing. Maybe who knows, after 10 years, the government, rather than targeting your income, government is targeting expenditure. Okay? So for example, your credit cards are linked with your mobile number, Aadhaar number, PAN number, anything which is linked. So the government may be able to pull down all the details of your expenditure just by using your mobile number or your Aadhaar number, if everything is linked together. So even if you show little amount of income, your expenditure will tell you what is the actual income you are generating, right? So currently it is not possible, but yes, that's a indirect way of approaching an issue when you don't have a direct way, right? Yes. No, 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 no. It's not about numericals. You need to understand the concept. Those. No, 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 no. You need to understand the concept. If you are able to understand and interpret the concept, that is sufficient. Huh? Factor, cost and market price. That is a way of saying. See, factor, cost and market price are two same things. See, the government imposes taxes. There is a direct taxes. See, the government taxes, so employees' income reduces by the tax amount. At the same time, employees get certain amount of subsidies from the government. So their income increases by the subsidy amount, right? So when you calculate the GDP using market price, in the market price the GST or the taxes are included. So you include the net taxes. That is your tax minus subsidy. In the factor cost, the taxes are not received by the factors of payment. When you are using calculating GDP, that how many units of money the factors of production have received, they don't receive the taxes, but they receive subsidies, right? So that you have to add the subsidy and reduce the taxes. So that is the GDP at market price and GDP at the factor cost. Huh? Once again. No, it's not a demerit of GDP. Unemployment benefit is a policy, it's a good policy, intention is good. Because if the people are losing job, the government wants to support them. Huh? It is not a true. Huh? If you are calculating GDP using the income approach, that will be part of your income approach GDP, because he is getting money. So there is a debate. If you look at the social security system as an income, so you include in the GDP. If you are looking at social security system as a transfers, like government has a subsidy and transfer, grants in aid and transfer. So all social security system are transfers. So transfers are only transfer, they are not leading to any creation of goods and service. So from that point of view, we never include social security benefit in the GDP, because just like the old house resold in this year, money is generated, but that money is not part of GDP because that house was produced 1 year before. So he is getting 80,000 rupees, but he is not contributing anything in the economy. We not include, because that is a part of your transfer income. If you are wrongly considering that they are receiving an income, so that will be it's a kind of error. You are overestimating your GDP. Thank you. Okay. Please ask somebody in the control room to come. During the business cycle process, when you have recession, and when you have a depression, in that because of this business cycle, cyclical unemployment comes. ठीक है, business cycle leads to cyclical unemployment. The other type of class over. So the other type of unemployment is your frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is suppose the employee is working in a company and he may not be happy with the present job. Either maybe the work culture, maybe not happy with the salary, he want to switch the job.
He's
So
not happy with the current.
Either he has quit the job and he did not find a new job, or he has quit the job or he is in the notice period, that there is a lag between यहाँ से उसने जल्दी immediately क्विट कर दिया लेकिन वहाँ ज्वाइन करने के लिए 3 महीने का टाइम ले रहा है. So if for a brief period the particular person is being unemployed. If he is unemployed,
In which the period he is looking for a new
हाँ new job,
So
or he is
that
waiting,
period he is frictional employment.
हाँ, or he is waiting to join a job that he have already received. So he is waiting.